The Millionaire Who Became Homeless, a 7-day journey that changed everything. In 72 hours, a man who had never touched dirty money was digging through garbage to survive. This is the true story of how 7 days on the streets transformed a millionaire into someone unrecognizable, even to himself. This man had everything: a penthouse, luxury cars, an 8-figure bank account. In 7 days, he would be begging for scraps. What happened during this week wasn't just a social experiment. It was a complete demolition of everything he believed about life. And when you discover why he did it, you'll never see a homeless person the same way again. Meet Ethan Carter, a wealthy man who seemed to have it all: money, success, and luxury. Yet deep inside, he felt an emptiness that no fortune could fill. One night, after seeing a homeless man ignored by hundreds of passers-by, Ethan made a decision that would change his life forever. He would leave his mansion behind and spend 7 days as a homeless man. But Ethan had no idea that his first night on the streets would almost be his last, for a reason he never expected. Ethan Carter's penthouse stretched across the top floor of a gleaming tower, its windows framing a city that pulsed with restless ambition. From up there, the traffic looked like veins of light, and the world seemed small, manageable, almost insignificant. Inside, every corner of his home reflected wealth: marble floors, fine art, and rare wines stacked in a cellar. Yet despite the abundance, Ethan often found himself staring blankly out the window, feeling a weight pressing on his chest. Something essential was missing, though he couldn't quite name it. His mornings were perfectly orchestrated routines. A private chef prepared his meals, his driver waited downstairs, and his assistant ensured his calendar was full. Every hour had purpose, but none seemed meaningful. As he sipped imported coffee, he wondered why the flavor felt hollow. He had built an empire from scratch, turning small investments into vast real estate ventures, but victory no longer thrilled him. It was as though success had become a cage, one made not of steel, but of expectations. Conversations at networking events blurred together in his memory. Everyone talked about stocks, mergers, and acquisitions, yet no one spoke about dreams or struggles. He smiled and nodded, but inside, he drifted further from connection. He remembered the excitement of his early days, when risk and vision had been his fuel. Now, surrounded by luxury, he felt detached from the very life he had fought to build. His fortune was proof of power, but it was powerless to fill the void within him. At night, he lay in his silk-sheeted bed, scrolling through news feeds filled with headlines about poverty, crime, and despair. He told himself those problems belonged to another world, one he would never understand. Still, a nagging guilt stirred whenever he looked at the people sleeping on sidewalks during his chauffeured rides. He dismissed it quickly, convincing himself it was not his responsibility. Yet the image of hollow eyes beneath tattered blankets lingered. Something inside him was unsettled. One evening during a lavish dinner, a colleague boasted about evicting struggling tenants to double his profits. The table erupted in laughter, but Ethan felt sick. He excused himself early, stepping into the cool night air. The city below was alive with voices, horns, and hurried footsteps. Looking down from his car window, he saw a man curled on the pavement, clutching a cardboard sign. For the first time, Ethan didn't look away. Something in the man's eyes pierced his soul. What Ethan didn't know was that this single moment of eye contact would haunt him for days and drive him to a decision that would terrify his closest friends. The man wasn't begging, he was enduring. Ethan studied him through the glass as his driver accelerated, leaving the image behind. But the man's stare lingered, burning into Ethan's thoughts long after he returned to his pristine apartment. That night, sleep eluded him. He tossed and turned, haunted not by business concerns, but by the silent presence of that stranger on the sidewalk. It felt like a mirror reflecting everything Ethan refused to confront. As dawn broke, Ethan wandered through his penthouse aimlessly. The polished surfaces and designer furniture suddenly seemed lifeless. He touched a framed photo of himself receiving an award years ago, but the pride it once evoked had vanished. For all his wealth, he felt powerless to answer a question that now consumed him. Why did he feel so empty? The silence of his home offered no reply. He began to suspect the answer lay outside his walls. Standing before his floor-to-ceiling windows, Ethan observed the city's rhythms. Workers hurried to buses, vendors opened stalls, and street performers prepared their corners. Life moved with grit and struggle, and he realized he had lived far removed from it for years. A strange desire stirred within him, to step down from his tower and live among those he had ignored. He didn't fully understand why, but he felt drawn towards something radical, something raw. By the time the sun fully rose, Ethan had made a silent vow. He would not just donate money or fund another soulless foundation. He would go to the streets himself, stripped of wealth and status. For 1 week, he would live as one of the homeless, seeking answers to questions that haunted him. He didn't know what he would find, but for the first time in years he felt alive with anticipation. His comfortable cage had cracked. On the second day, something would happen that would change not just his perspective on poverty, but on his own humanity. The image of the man on the pavement continued to haunt Ethan throughout the week. Every business meeting felt trivial, every polished handshake empty. While others around him celebrated profits, he kept replaying that look of silent endurance in the stranger's eyes. It wasn't desperation, it was resilience, and it unsettled him deeply. He realized he had spent years avoiding eye contact with people like that, as if their existence threatened his own. Now he couldn't look away. At lunch with his business partner, Ethan's thoughts drifted. His partner droned on about an acquisition, but Ethan barely listened. Instead, he watched through the restaurant window as a homeless woman rifled through a trash can outside. The contrast between her search for scraps and the untouched plates of gourmet food on their table filled him with shame. He excused himself early, ignoring his partner's confusion. For the first time, he felt like an outsider in his own world. That night, he wandered downtown, dressed casually so he wouldn't draw attention. The city was different when seen up close instead of from tinted car windows. He noticed the cardboard beds tucked into alleyways, the makeshift shelters under bridges, and the silent exchanges of those surviving with almost nothing. Their faces carried stories of hardship, yet he also saw laughter and camaraderie among some groups. It struck him as paradoxical. Those with the least seemed to share the most. He stopped near a man playing guitar with only 3 strings. Passers-by ignored him, but Ethan stood listening, moved by the raw melody. When the man finished, Ethan gave him a few bills, but the guitarist shook his head. "Don't give me money, brother. Give me your time." The words echoed like a challenge. Ethan sat beside him for a while, listening to stories about lost jobs, broken families, and small hopes. For the first time, he felt connected to strangers. Returning home late, Ethan entered his penthouse quietly. The silence was suffocating compared to the laughter he had just heard on the streets. He opened his wardrobe, filled with expensive suits, and felt disgust rather than pride. He realized he had built a life designed to impress, not to fulfill. The emptiness that had lingered for years was now undeniable. He was surrounded by abundance, yet starving for meaning. He knew he could no longer ignore it. The following day, he confided in Michael, an old friend and fellow entrepreneur. Over drinks, Ethan explained his growing desire to live on the streets for a short time, to understand the struggles firsthand. Michael burst out laughing, shaking his head in disbelief. "You? Sleeping on concrete? Ethan, you'd last a day. Don't be ridiculous." The mockery stung, but it also solidified Ethan's resolve. If no one understood, perhaps that was proof he needed to go through with it. But what Ethan discovered about himself in those first 24 hours would shock him more than any business failure ever had. Alone that evening, Ethan began preparing in secret. He withdrew cash from his accounts, not to spend, but to set aside for emergencies. He picked out old clothes, tearing and staining them to avoid suspicion. He studied the city's homeless population discreetly, observing their routines and survival strategies. Each step felt surreal, as though he were shedding layers of privilege. The thought of surrendering comfort frightened him, but the fear also excited him. He had never faced life this raw. As days passed, his conviction grew stronger. He realized this wasn't about charity or publicity. It was about truth. He had spent decades building wealth, but had never understood the lives of those at the bottom. Now he craved that understanding, even if it meant suffering. He didn't plan to reveal his identity to anyone. For 7 days he would simply be another man on the streets, vulnerable and anonymous. It would be the truest test of his spirit. On the night before his departure, Ethan packed a small backpack with essentials, a water bottle, a worn-out blanket, and nothing more. He gazed at his reflection in the mirror, almost unrecognizable in ragged clothes. For the first time, he saw not the millionaire, but the man beneath the titles. Fear gnawed at him, but beneath it was a sense of liberation. He was about to step into the unknown, leaving his empire behind. Lying awake, he replayed the questions that had driven him here. What does it mean to live without security? How does the world treat you when you have nothing? And most importantly, who would he become without his wealth? As the city outside buzzed with life, Ethan felt a mix of dread and anticipation. By dawn, his decision was final. Tomorrow the millionaire would disappear. A homeless man would take his place, and the journey would begin. Ethan awoke with determination, his mind still echoing with doubts from the night before. He knew that stepping away from his wealth would mean confronting fears he had never allowed himself to feel. The penthouse that once seemed majestic now looked like a hollow monument to emptiness. He walked through the rooms slowly, touching objects that had once defined his pride. Now they were meaningless trinkets in the face of the unknown challenge he was about to embrace. He called his assistant to clear his schedule for the week, offering a vague excuse of personal reflection. It felt strange to conceal the truth, but he knew no one would understand. His friends would ridicule him just as Michael had, and his staff would try to stop him. This was not something he could share with others. It was his private rebellion against comfort, his quest to strip away illusions and face reality as it was. What happened next would test every assumption Ethan had about strength, survival, and what it truly means to be human. Ethan took a final drive across the city in his luxury car, staring out the window as if memorizing his old life. Skyscrapers blurred into neighborhoods, and neighborhoods into alleys where shadows lingered. Soon he would trade leather seats for sidewalks, gourmet food for scraps, and safety for uncertainty. His heart pounded, not with fear alone, but with a spark of freedom. For the first time in years, he was about to do something unpredictable. That evening, he returned home and gathered what little he would take: a worn-out backpack, an old jacket, and the courage to face humiliation. He placed his watch and wallet in a safe, keeping only a few coins. Standing in front of the mirror, he no longer recognized himself in ragged clothes. The man staring back looked vulnerable, exposed, almost human in a way Ethan hadn't felt in decades. A deep breath sealed his commitment. Before midnight, he stepped out of his building unnoticed, leaving behind the life of privilege. The air felt sharper, colder, as though the city itself recognized his transformation. Every step away from his home carried him deeper into the unknown. For the first time, Ethan wasn't a figure of wealth or authority. He was simply another man in the crowd. The journey had begun, and there was no turning back. The first night struck Ethan harder than he had imagined. The sidewalk beneath him was unforgiving, each stone pressing into his back like a reminder of vulnerability. The chill of the night pierced through his jacket, and the constant noise of the city denied him rest. Around him, others settled into their makeshift shelters with practiced ease. For them, this was routine. For Ethan, it was a harsh introduction to a world without safety nets. He tried to sleep, but hunger gnawed at him. His stomach twisted as he remembered the untouched dinner he had pushed aside in his apartment. The irony was painful. In his former life, food was abundant and often wasted. Now, each crumb mattered. He looked around at the quiet figures bundled in blankets and realized survival was not just about endurance, it was about adaptation. His pride, once a shield, now felt like a burden he could no longer carry. In the early hours, a passerby tossed coins near him without looking. Ethan felt a rush of humiliation as the coins clinked against the pavement. He hesitated before picking them up, ashamed of the gesture, but aware he might need them. It was his first taste of invisibility, the realization that people saw only a stereotype, not a person. That single moment cut deeper than any physical discomfort. It was the price of being unseen. As dawn approached, exhaustion overtook him. The city awakened with footsteps and chatter, while Ethan sat against a wall, his body aching. He studied the faces rushing past, each expression determined, busy, oblivious. Not one stopped to acknowledge him. He realized then that his greatest struggle would not be hunger or cold. It would be enduring the crushing weight of being ignored. The world had moved on, and he no longer belonged to it. Yet beneath the discomfort, a strange clarity emerged. For years, Ethan had ruled over his life with control and wealth, believing he was untouchable. But here, stripped of everything, he felt closer to truth than ever before. This was not an experiment in suffering. It was a confrontation with reality. As the sun rose higher, he promised himself to survive this first day. The week stretched before him like an uncharted map, and he was ready to walk it. But what Ethan would discover about the man he met next would challenge everything he thought he knew about success and failure. By midday, Ethan's hunger had grown unbearable. He wandered through alleys and crowded streets, searching for anything edible. He tried approaching a food stall, but the vendor dismissed him with a wave of the hand as though he were an annoyance. Embarrassed, Ethan retreated, realizing how far he had fallen in the eyes of strangers. The once confident millionaire was now just another man scorned by society's gaze. He attempted to ask for help, but each word caught in his throat. Pride and shame battled within him, choking his voice. When he finally muttered a request for spare change, people passed as though he were invisible. Some glanced at him with contempt, others ignored him completely. The rejection burned deeper than hunger, leaving him hollow. Ethan began to understand why many gave up on seeking kindness at all. As the day dragged on, he noticed the hostility between some of the homeless. Resources were scarce, and competition bred conflict. A younger man pushed Ethan aside to claim a sheltered corner, muttering insults under his breath. Ethan wanted to fight back, but weakness held him still. He realized survival wasn't only about finding food, it was about navigating the unspoken rules of this world. For now, he chose silence over confrontation. Desperate, Ethan searched garbage bins for scraps. The smell of rot made him gag, yet he forced himself to swallow a stale piece of bread. Each bite carried both shame and awakening. He remembered the lavish meals he had once left unfinished, wasting them without thought. Now even moldy crumbs tasted like salvation. For the first time, he felt the sharp sting of hunger, as those on the streets did every single day. That night, he returned to the pavement, weary and shaken. His body ached from walking endlessly, and his soul carried the weight of rejection. He curled beneath a torn blanket, listening to the distant sounds of laughter from restaurants he could no longer enter. He understood then that poverty was not just about lacking money, it was about being exiled from dignity. The harsh reality of his decision had finally set in. The next morning, Ethan's body was stiff and weak. He struggled to sit up, noticing an older man watching him from a few feet away. The stranger had kind eyes hidden beneath a weathered face, his beard streaked with gray. "Rough night?" the man asked gently, his voice carrying both humor and empathy. Ethan nodded silently, unsure whether to trust him. The man introduced himself as Samuel, a veteran of the streets. Samuel offered Ethan half of a sandwich he had managed to save. Ethan hesitated, ashamed of taking from someone who had so little. But Samuel insisted, saying, "Out here, we survive by sharing." The gesture touched Ethan deeply, striking him with more force than any insult he had endured. It was the first act of kindness he had received since stepping onto the streets. He accepted gratefully, realizing the value of generosity. As they walked together, Samuel explained the unwritten rules of street life. Certain corners were claimed, shelters had pecking orders, and trust was fragile. He warned Ethan to stay alert at night, as desperation often turned people cruel. Ethan listened intently, absorbing the wisdom born of survival. Samuel was not just a guide, he was living proof that resilience could outlast despair. Ethan began to see him as both a protector and a teacher. What Ethan discovered about Samuel's past would shatter every stereotype he'd ever held about homeless people. In conversation, Samuel revealed fragments of his past. Once he had a family and a stable job, But misfortune and loss had stripped everything away. He spoke without bitterness, carrying his pain with quiet dignity. Ethan was shaken by the realization that homelessness could happen to anyone, even those who once had lives like his. For the first time, Ethan's perception of the homeless began to shatter. They were not statistics, they were stories. That evening, Ethan sat beside Samuel as the city darkened. For the first time, he didn't feel entirely alone. He realized survival wasn't only about food or shelter, it was about connection. Samuel's presence gave him strength, and his words carried more wisdom than any boardroom lecture Ethan had ever attended. As the night settled in, Ethan silently vowed to learn everything he could from this man who had lost everything but still carried hope. On the third day, Ethan followed Samuel to a small community shelter where food was sometimes distributed. The line was long, filled with weary faces, and the air carried a mix of hope and desperation. Ethan kept his head low, ashamed of being recognized, though no one paid him special attention. When his turn came, he was greeted by Clara, a young social worker with bright, determined eyes. Her smile was genuine, cutting through the despair that surrounded them. Clara handed him a plate of food and asked softly, "How are you holding up?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how to respond. Her voice was filled not with pity, but with compassion, something he hadn't felt in years, even among friends. For a moment, he forgot he was pretending to belong in this world. He simply felt seen, acknowledged as a human being, rather than a burden. That simple gesture stirred something deep inside him. Later, Ethan observed Clara moving through the shelter, speaking kindly to each person. She remembered names, listened to stories, and offered encouragement. Her energy stood in stark contrast to the indifference of the city outside. Ethan realized that while money had always been his measure of power, Clara's influence came from empathy and time. In her presence, people stood taller, as if reminded they still mattered. It was a strength he had never understood before. When Clara returned to check on him, Ethan asked why she dedicated her life to helping strangers. She replied, "Because no one deserves to be invisible." The words hit him like a blow, echoing the very feeling that had haunted him since his first night. For years, Ethan had walked past countless people without seeing them. Now, through Clara's eyes, he finally recognized the cruelty of his blindness. Compassion, he realized, was a form of wealth. As he left the shelter, Ethan carried more than a full stomach. He carried the weight of her words and the inspiration they ignited. Samuel noticed the change in him and smiled knowingly. "She reminds us we're still human," Samuel said. Ethan nodded, silently agreeing. The kindness of one woman had shaken him more than any business victory ever had. It was a lesson he would not forget, one that would guide his journey forward. You know, watching Ethan discover the power of human connection through Samuel and Clara reminds me why I share these stories with you. Each week I meet incredible people like you in the comments who share their own experiences of transformation and compassion. If these stories are touching your heart the way they touch mine, I'd love to have you join our community by hitting subscribe. Together, we can keep sharing these powerful reminders of what it means to be truly human. Now, let's see how Ethan's journey reaches its most challenging moment. By the fourth day, exhaustion had etched itself into Ethan's body. His feet ached from endless walking, and his hunger returned as quickly as it was relieved. The city, once a playground for his wealth, now felt like a battlefield where survival consumed every thought. Samuel warned him that the hardest part was not the cold or hunger, but the constant erosion of hope. Ethan began to understand what that meant with every passing hour. That afternoon, Ethan tried to beg openly for the first time. Standing near a busy intersection, he extended his hand timidly. Most people passed without glancing. Others frowned in annoyance, and one man muttered cruel words under his breath. Each rejection cut deeper than the last, stripping away layers of pride he hadn't realized he still carried. The humiliation was overwhelming, yet he refused to walk away. It was a necessary wound to his soul. When he finally received a small coin from a stranger, the relief was mixed with shame. He had once signed checks worth millions without a second thought, yet now a single coin felt like salvation. Samuel reminded him not to see it as failure, but as survival. Ethan listened, though the lesson was painful. He realized that humility wasn't a choice on the streets, it was the price of existence. Pride could not fill an empty stomach. As the evening set in, Ethan felt the weight of despair pressing harder. He thought about quitting, about returning to the comfort of his penthouse, but the thought disgusted him. To walk away now would mean learning nothing. He remembered Clara's words and Samuel's resilience, both of which gave him strength to endure. The week wasn't over, and his journey had only just begun. He had to continue no matter the cost. That night, lying on cold concrete beside Samuel, Ethan whispered his doubts aloud. Samuel listened quietly before saying, "Pain teaches what comfort never can." The words lingered in Ethan's heart, both harsh and comforting. As he closed his eyes, he knew he couldn't give up. He would finish what he started, even if it broke him. For the first time, he felt the faint stirrings of transformation within himself. The struggle was becoming his teacher. But what Samuel was about to reveal about his past would change everything Ethan thought he knew about success, failure, and the thin line between them. On the fifth day, Ethan and Samuel sat beneath a bridge, sharing silence broken only by the distant hum of traffic. Ethan finally asked about Samuel's past, curious about the man's calm strength. Samuel hesitated, then spoke with a quiet gravity. He revealed he had once been a husband, a father, and an engineer, living a stable and respected life. Misfortune came in waves, his wife's illness, job loss, and mounting debts, until the streets became his only refuge. Ethan listened intently, stunned by the parallels between Samuel's former life and his own. He realized that homelessness wasn't always the result of laziness or vice, as many assumed. Sometimes it was tragedy, a cruel series of events no one could control. The truth shattered Ethan's stereotypes, exposing how fragile success truly was. One wrong turn, one twist of fate, and anyone could lose everything. The safety he had believed unshakable now felt precarious. Samuel spoke without bitterness, though his eyes carried the weight of years in exile. "I lost my home, but I didn't lose myself," he said firmly. Ethan admired the resilience, though he also sensed unspoken grief beneath the words. He thought of his own life, how he had been shielded by privilege from consequences that crushed others. For the first time, he understood the unfairness of a system that offered no second chances. It unsettled him deeply. That evening, Ethan replayed Samuel's story in his mind. He thought of Clara, of the countless faces he had once ignored, and of his own arrogance. The streets were no longer just a place of suffering. They were a mirror reflecting hidden truths. He realized that wealth had blinded him to humanity, turning people into numbers, problems, or background scenery. Now, each face told a story, and each story demanded to be heard. Ethan's heart softened. As he drifted into sleep, Ethan whispered a promise to himself. If he ever returned to his old life, he would not return unchanged. He would carry Samuel's story and the stories of countless others into every decision he made. The millionaire who once saw poverty as distant now felt its weight pressing against his soul. The revelation had cracked him open, and he knew there was no going back to ignorance. His journey was reshaping him. On the sixth night, Ethan would face his greatest fear and discover that the real danger didn't come from where he expected. The sixth day began with cautious hope, but it quickly unraveled. Ethan had managed to gather a few coins from passers-by, enough to buy a small loaf of bread. For the first time, he felt a flicker of accomplishment, as though he was learning to endure this life. But as he returned to his spot, a younger, homeless man approached him aggressively. Without warning, the man snatched the bread and shoved Ethan aside, sneering as he walked away. The betrayal stung far more than the loss of food. Ethan had believed that shared suffering created solidarity, but now he saw that desperation often bred cruelty. Samuel helped him up, his face calm but weary. "It happens," he said simply, as though betrayal were an accepted part of survival. Ethan clenched his fists in frustration, realizing how fragile trust was in a world where every crumb mattered. The harshness of the streets tested more than his body, it tested his spirit. For hours, Ethan sat in silence, wrestling with anger and humiliation. He wanted to lash out, to demand justice, but he knew there was none to be found here. The rules of his old world, contracts, security, law, did not apply. Here, only survival dictated right and wrong. That realization shook him, forcing him to confront how much he had depended on structures of privilege. Stripped of them, he was vulnerable, just like everyone else. As night fell, Samuel urged Ethan not to let bitterness consume him. "You can lose food, you can lose money, but don't lose yourself," Samuel said. The words struck Ethan deeply, reminding him of the thin line between endurance and despair. Betrayal had wounded him, but it also revealed something important. Survival wasn't just about holding on to possessions, it was about holding on to humanity. Without it, the streets would break him completely. That night, Ethan lay awake under the dim glow of streetlights, replaying the day's events. He realized how quickly desperation could strip away morality and how easily trust could be shattered. But he also understood Samuel's wisdom. Clinging to anger would only deepen the wounds. He resolved to endure, not with bitterness but with resilience. The betrayal had shaken him, but it had also taught him another painful truth about the fragility of human dignity. The sixth night tested Ethan in ways he had never imagined. Exhaustion weighed heavily on his body, and hunger gnawed at him with relentless persistence. As he searched for a corner to rest, a group of men approached, their voices sharp and threatening. One shoved him to the ground while another rifled through his pockets, though there was little to steal. The attack left Ethan bruised, his body aching as the men disappeared into the shadows. Lying on the cold pavement, Ethan felt the crushing reality of his vulnerability. The pain from his bruises was sharp, but the deeper wound was the sense of helplessness. He had always believed strength came from control and wealth, yet here, stripped of everything, he was defenseless. Tears welled in his eyes, though he tried to hide them from Samuel, who sat silently nearby. For the first time, Ethan wondered if he could truly survive. As the hours dragged on, despair wrapped around him like chains. Every sound of footsteps nearby made him flinch, fearing another assault. He longed for the safety of his penthouse, the locked doors, the warmth of a bed. But the thought of giving up filled him with shame. He had come here to learn, to understand, and quitting now would make the suffering meaningless. Still, his spirit was fragile, teetering on the edge of surrender. Samuel placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice low but steady. "This life breaks you down, Ethan, but it also shows you what's left when everything is stripped away." The words echoed in his mind, harsh yet undeniable. Ethan realized the streets didn't only challenge survival, they tested the soul itself. He wasn't sure he liked what he saw within himself: fear, weakness, and doubt. His confidence had been shattered into fragile pieces. By dawn, Ethan sat slumped against a wall, his body aching and his spirit weary. The night had left him shaken, closer to quitting than ever before. Yet something inside refused to let him stop. The breaking point had come, and though he felt broken, he also sensed the beginning of transformation. To rise again, he would need to let go of pride and accept his own fragility. Only then could he discover true strength. But the most surprising revelation would come on the last day, when Ethan realized that going home would be harder than leaving it. When the sun rose, Ethan dragged himself to his feet, his body still sore from the attack. Samuel walked beside him, offering quiet guidance without judgment. They moved slowly through the city, blending with others who shared their struggle. Each face they passed carried its own story, marked by hardship and resilience. Ethan realized that despite his pain, he was not alone. He was part of something larger, a silent community bound by survival. At a shelter later that day, Ethan saw Clara again. She noticed the bruises on his face and asked gently what had happened. For a moment, he almost confessed everything, that he wasn't truly homeless, that this was all a choice. But pride and shame kept him silent. Instead, he accepted her care, allowing her kindness to mend wounds no money could heal. Her compassion reminded him that even in darkness, humanity still glimmered like light. That evening, Samuel shared a piece of stale bread with him, and together they ate in silence. Ethan thought about the simple act of sharing, about how survival here depended less on possessions and more on connection. He realized he had spent his life hoarding wealth, yet true wealth came from moments like this. It wasn't comfort or luxury that mattered. It was the bonds forged in struggle. The lesson sank deeper than any business strategy ever had. As night approached, Ethan made a decision. He would not quit, no matter how harsh the streets became. The bruises on his body were proof of his endurance, not his weakness. The fear that once consumed him began to transform into resolve. He was no longer just enduring for the sake of an experiment. He was enduring to prove to himself that he could change. His week was nearly over, but his journey had only just begun. Lying beneath the open sky, Ethan whispered a silent promise. He would finish what he started, not because he had to, but because the experience was shaping him into someone new. The streets had stripped away his arrogance, his illusions, and his pride. What remained was fragile yet real, a man searching for meaning beyond wealth. In choosing to endure, Ethan had taken his first step toward becoming more than just a millionaire. On the seventh morning, Ethan awoke with a strange sense of peace. His body still ached, but the despair that once weighed him down had lifted. He watched the city wake around him, the streets filling with hurried footsteps and impatient horns. For the first time, he didn't feel invisible. Instead, he felt connected, as though the suffering he endured had stitched him into the fabric of the city itself. He belonged in a way wealth had never offered. Samuel smiled knowingly, noticing the change in Ethan's eyes. "You look different," he said, handing Ethan a piece of bread. Ethan laughed softly, realizing it was true. He had arrived broken and arrogant, but now he felt humbled and renewed. Each rejection, each hardship, had stripped away a layer of false security. What remained was raw, but it was real. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was awakening to a truth greater than himself. Later that day, Clara found Ethan sitting quietly outside the shelter. She greeted him warmly, asking about his well-being. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude toward her, not just for her kindness, but for reminding him of humanity's best side. He listened as she spoke passionately about her work, about the fight to restore dignity to those who had lost everything. Her words resonated deeply, igniting a fire inside him to carry this mission forward. As the sun set, Ethan realized his week on the streets was nearly over. A part of him felt relief, longing for warmth and safety. But another part hesitated, afraid of losing the clarity he had gained. The streets had taught him lessons no luxury could ever provide. He understood now that wealth without compassion was empty, and success without humanity was hollow. The change within him was undeniable, and he vowed not to let it fade. That night, as he lay beside Samuel, Ethan whispered, "Thank you for everything." Samuel simply nodded, his weathered face softened by a rare smile. Ethan closed his eyes, carrying the weight of both pain and wisdom. Tomorrow, he would return to his old world. But tonight, he rested as a man transformed, knowing the dawn would not only mark the end of his week, it would mark the beginning of a new life. The next morning, Ethan walked back toward his penthouse, each step heavier than the last. The contrast between the streets and his building's gleaming lobby was staggering. The doorman greeted him with polished courtesy, oblivious to the transformation Ethan had undergone. Inside, the marble floors and chandeliers felt foreign, almost grotesque. The luxury that once defined him now seemed lifeless, stripped of meaning by the raw truths he had faced. He showered for the first time in days, scrubbing away the grime but not the memories. The hot water stung his bruises, reminding him of the week's struggles. As he dressed in tailored clothes again, he felt like he was putting on armor, protective but heavy, distancing him from what he had just lived. The reflection in the mirror showed a millionaire, but Ethan knew that beneath the surface he was no longer the same man. Sitting in his vast dining room, Ethan stared at a perfectly prepared meal. The aroma filled the space, but his appetite was gone. He remembered the stale bread he had shared with Samuel, how meaningful it had been despite its simplicity. The food before him felt empty, just another symbol of indulgence. He pushed the plate aside, realizing that comfort no longer satisfied him. What he craved now was purpose, something deeper than consumption. Later he looked out from his penthouse windows, watching the city sprawl below. The skyscrapers, the bustling streets, the hidden alleys. He saw them all differently now. The world was no longer divided between his and theirs. It was one, connected by shared struggles and unspoken resilience. Ethan knew he could not return to living as before. To do so would betray everything he had learned. The week had rewritten the script of his life. That evening, he opened his safe and withdrew a portion of his wealth. He no longer saw it as a symbol of power, but as a tool for change. The decision was clear. He would use his fortune to restore dignity to those who had been forgotten. His heart beat with a mixture of fear and excitement. The streets had shown him pain, but they had also given him purpose. Ethan was ready to begin his new mission. In the days that followed, Ethan began to reshape his life with deliberate purpose. He contacted Clara, offering not just donations, but his active involvement in her work. Together, they designed programs to provide food, shelter, and pathways back into society for the homeless. Ethan insisted on meeting the people personally, listening to their stories, and learning from them. His wealth became more than numbers in an account. It became a lifeline for those who had been silenced. Samuel, though hesitant at first, agreed to join Ethan in the new initiative. Ethan arranged a safe place for him to live, not as charity but as partnership. Samuel's wisdom and lived experience became invaluable in shaping the project. For Ethan, this was more than repayment. It was respect. He recognized Samuel not as a man broken by circumstance, but as a leader who could guide others toward hope. Their unlikely friendship had become a foundation for change. News of Ethan's transformation spread quickly, but he rejected interviews and publicity. He wanted the work to speak for itself, not his name. The millionaire who once sought admiration now sought only impact. Clara admired his humility, reminding him that true change was measured in lives touched, not headlines printed. Ethan finally understood that purpose was not found in applause, but in the quiet victories of restored dignity. For the first time, he felt truly rich. The city began to notice the difference. Shelters improved, job training programs launched, and awareness campaigns shifted public perception. Where once people walked past the homeless with indifference, some now stopped to listen, to share, to help. Ethan watched with awe as small ripples of compassion grew into waves. He knew the problem was far from solved, but progress had begun. He was no longer a spectator of suffering, he was an architect of change. One evening, Ethan returned to the same street where he had first spent the night as a homeless man. He stood quietly, watching the city lights flicker above the pavement. The memory of pain and invisibility still lingered, but it no longer haunted him. Instead, it fueled him. He whispered softly, "I won't forget." Then he turned and walked forward, not as a millionaire defined by wealth, but as a man reborn with purpose. 7 days on the streets had cost him his comfort, his pride, and his illusions. But in return, it had given him something far more valuable: the understanding that true wealth isn't measured in what you have, but in what you give. Ethan Carter had found what was missing all along, not in his penthouse overlooking the city, but on the streets below among the people he had once ignored. His transformation wasn't just personal, it became a movement, and the homeless man who had haunted his thoughts that first night. He would never know that a single moment of eye contact had changed not just one life, but hundreds. Sometimes, the greatest journeys begin with the courage to lose everything, to find what truly matters. Ethan's story shows us that sometimes we need to lose everything to find what truly matters. But here's what I find most beautiful about sharing these stories with you. In the comments below, I constantly see how they inspire real change in people's lives. Some of you have shared how you've started volunteering, others how you've simply begun seeing homeless individuals differently. That's the real power of these stories. They don't just entertain, they transform. If Ethan's journey moved you the way it moved me, I'd be honored to have you subscribe and become part of our community of people who believe in the power of human transformation. And I'm genuinely curious, has there ever been a moment in your life when losing something led you to find something more valuable? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come not from the stories I tell, but from the experiences you share with each other. Because at the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home, one story at a time.